Greetings, and welcome to the Spring 2021 Civic Engagement Public Speaking Contest. This contest is hosted every semester by the Department of Communication Arts and Sciences to acknowledge and to recognize the strongest students in CAS 100A, the introductory public speaking class at Penn State University. Now, in order for students to make it to this final round, they have to receive a nomination following a class assignment. They have to participate in preliminary and semifinal rounds where they are evaluated by instructor judges. And then finally, they participate as the top 6 competitors in this final round, where they are evaluated by alumni, members of the state college community, and members of the CAS community on campus. Now, this is a difficult contest for anyone at any time, but that is particularly true in the midst of a pandemic that continues to disrupt so much of our daily lives. Whereas we would normally have this final round in a large auditorium where I would get to make ridiculous jokes and you would feel obliged to laugh at them, this semester, as in the fall, we have changed the contest for health and safety reasons. Students submitted recorded videos of their speeches from their courses, and judges watched and evaluated them asynchronously over the course of the last several weeks. As a result, I would encourage audiences who are watching to keep in mind that the students recorded these speeches at home with the limited technology and resources they maybe had available, and as a result, all 6 of the finalist speeches will look a little bit different from one another, and that's okay. What we'd like you to focus on more is the students' presentations themselves, and the types of arguments and ways that they advance their ideas throughout the course of their speeches. And as another note before we start, we also would like to thank a few people without whom this contest would not have been possible. So first of all, I'd like to thank our Assistant Director, Jeff NAGEL, who has done a great deal of work this year to administer this contest and reimagine it for a pandemic year. Second, I would like to acknowledge all of the CAS faculty who have volunteered their time and efforts to nominate their students, judge their speeches, and participate in making this contest work. And finally, I would like to thank Emily Bush-Clark, who works in our administrative office and has been instrumental in aiding us with the logistics of holding this contest in this distanced and digital format. We would also like to take a moment to thank the guest judges who are watching this final round and who have evaluated the students' speeches. As you are watching this video, they have already analyzed and evaluated the speeches, but we still want to make sure we thank them for the time and labor that they've already put in to this contest. And so our first judge is George Gowan. George is a 1981 graduate of Penn State who continues to use the many skills he learned in his work in consulting and corporate real estate. Alongside his wife Karen, George is a strong and constant supporter of Penn State through many different facets. He is a member of the Alumni Society Board, he participates in the college's mentor program, and he helped to found the Alumni in Business panel. George is an annual donor to the Liberal Arts Futures Fund, as well as a supporter of the Paterno Fellows program, and we thank him for all of his continued support. Our second judge is Eric Mathis. Eric attributes much of his professional success to his CAS studies, which he completed in 2005. When he is not practicing law, Eric is passing on much of what he has learned to his students at Menlo College, where he is an adjunct professor teaching entrepreneurship and innovation. At Penn State, Eric was the 2003 recipient of the Harold J. Pat O'Brien Memorial Award in Communication Arts and Sciences, as well as the 2004 recipient of the Adma Hammam Shibley Memorial Scholarship in CAS. He also was a Schreier Honors Scholar, a member of Parmi Naus, and served as the marketing chair for Thon. And finally, our third and final judge this semester is CAS PhD student Ismail Quinones. Ismail was nominated through his position at the Center for Democratic Deliberation at Penn State, where he is a research assistant. When he is not saving democracy, Ismail studies the relationship between rhetoric and time, and in particular, how they relate to the afterlife of settler colonialism in Mexico. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in top venues, including Communication Education, as well as an article just published last week in the Quarterly Journal of Speech. Congrats to Ismail on that. And so I'd like to thank all 3 of these judges for taking the time to judge this contest. And so with those introductions, I want to provide just one final note before we get to the main event. And that is, if you are watching this during our live stream, please join us in conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #SpeechPSU, where we'll be discussing the speeches and the strengths that students have shown. We also invite you to participate in the live chat on this YouTube video. And so on that note, let's move on to the contest. Before each speech, either I or the instructor that works with that student in CAS 100 will provide a brief introduction of that student and their speech. And so our first competitor is Emma MESSERSMITH. Emma is a student in Lulu Peng's class. Emma is double majoring in political science and criminology. In her policy speech, she will be talking about the suicide problem in her home community in Wayne County, Pennsylvania. Her speech, according to Lulu, shows tremendous compassion and care for the people in her community, and we anticipate that you will enjoy this speech a great deal. And so, without any further ado, I hope you will join me in providing a Zoom clap for Emma to congratulate her on this final round. Thank you, Emma.
Imagine that you are at your lowest point in life. You're struggling with your mental health and nothing seems to be going right for you. All you want to do is talk to somebody, but you know that if you talk to someone, you will be perceived as weak. And so you hold it in. And that pressure keeps building and building and building until one day you can't take it anymore. One day you decide that the only way out is suicide. Unfortunately, this is the reality of so many people in my community in Wayne County, Pennsylvania. The suicide rate in Wayne County, PA is an escalating problem that will only get better if we implement a policy that is focused on mental health education and providing local resources to the community. In my speech, I am going to describe the depth and seriousness of the suicide rate in Wayne County, explain some factors in the high suicide rate in my community as it relates to its ruralness, and propose a policy to be enforced by the Wayne Highlands School Board. The policy would be aimed at requiring the local high school to give an annual presentation on suicide prevention and mental health. Behind each suicide statistic are real people, real members of our community who lost their lives in a battle with mental health. And while we cannot get them back, we have an obligation to do what we can to prevent more lives from being taken in the future. The statistics show a dismal outlook for Wayne County if there's not an intervention soon. According to the Wayne County Coroner's Report, suicide rates in Wayne County doubled from 2015 to 2016. And according to the CDC, the national suicide rate has seen a steady upward trend since 1999. Wayne County suicide rate follows that trend. Wayne County suicide rate is currently twice the national suicide rate. While the statistics depict a clear image of suicides in Wayne County, they do not explain why the suicide rate is so high in the first place. There are a few primary reasons for this high suicide rate in Wayne County, PA, with the main one being stigma. An article by the American Psychological Association cites Dr. Bryant Smalley as attributing rugged individualism and stigma as having a role in higher suicide rates in rural communities. Rugged individualism is the idea that you can't reach out for help if you need it. You need to do things yourself, and that's the only way that you can get it done. And this kind of bootstrap mentality discourages people from reaching out for help when they really need it. And both the CDC and the American Psychological Association have related the high suicide rate to trouble with resources in local communities. Rural individuals who struggle with mental health often only reach out to their primary physicians, and this can present a problem because in small communities, these patients often know their physicians outside of the clinical setting. And so, due to this small town environment, people don't want to reach out for help at all if they have stigma around their issues. With these main causes in mind, we can start to work towards finding a feasible solution for Wayne County. The best way to lower the suicide rate in Wayne County, PA is to implement an annual suicide education program in Honesdale High School. A comprehensive analysis of studies on reducing the suicide rate by Dr. Mary Jane Anderson from Augusta State University gives some suggestions for broaching this topic in schools. And so I have pulled a lot of my policy ideas from her study. Before the presentation, we will invite all parents to an informational seminar to learn more about the program and to have the opportunity to ask questions as needed. It is at this point in time that parents who wish to opt out of the program can choose to do so. During the presentation, we will give an accurate image of suicide and mental health struggles to help decrease stigma, give warning signs so students can recognize dangerous patterns in themselves or in others, and give out information on community resources and encourage students to reach out. After the presentation, we will have students identify a trusted adult in their lives should they need to confide in someone about a concern for themselves or someone else. And we will have students give anonymous feedback on the presentation so we can improve it for future generations. This plan is the best agent to tackle this problem because it does not take a lot of time. At most, it would take about 2 hours outside of the school day and about 2 hours for the parents' seminar. The time that goes into planning will be a little more intensive, but I believe that it's worth it if it means that we're saving lives in the process. This would also not take a lot of money. Volunteers and local suicide prevention organizations would be invited to present and maintain the program throughout the year, so this responsibility would not fall on the school district. Possible concerns that the audience may have might cause a little bit of doubt in this program, and I think the main concern is that suicidal ideation would increase after hearing more about suicide. But Dr. John Califat from Rutgers University refutes this idea. He says that talking about suicide does not increase suicide, but can instead open a discussion on a really important topic that is a life or death situation. Students are already aware of suicide, so presentations like this would not plant a seed in their minds. Another concern I can see being had is how does this affect suicide in the big picture? How is this going to impact our community, and is it going to be long term? And according to an article from The Atlantic, a Heartland Monitor poll from 2016 revealed that many people who grew up in rural communities stay there. So implementing a program like this would actually help break the generational cycle of keeping silence on issues of mental health and suicidal thoughts. So while this would not be the solution to the suicide rate in Wayne County, this would be a great first step at lowering that rate. In implementing the program in this way, public stigma around mental health should decrease, and students should know where they can receive help if they or someone they know is struggling with mental health. Overall, the tragic high suicide rate in rural communities like Wayne County is only going to get better if we act soon. In comparison to averages in other parts of the United States, Wayne County, PA has a very high suicide rate, and the trends show that it will continue to grow in the coming years. The two main factors in this problem are the pervasiveness of public stigma around mental health and the lack of awareness of local resources. And to combat this, we should implement a yearly program in Honesdale High School that aims to depict mental health struggles accurately, to inform students of warning signs, and to help students recognize resources that are available to them. A program dedicated to providing information to students is the best chance we have at tackling the escalating suicide rate in Wayne County. And no matter how complex or dismal this program is, we have a moral and communal obligation to put an end to the suffering and needless loss of lives in our beloved rural community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robin KRAMER, and it's my pleasure this evening to introduce you to your next speaker, Justin Doe. Justin comes from San Jose, California, where his parents, both of whom were refugees from the Vietnam War, were engineers. And early on, Justin grew up with a strong affinity, respect, and awe of the wonders of technology. And he pursued that as he studied robotics actively in high school and as part of his high school robotics club. However, it was a profound tragedy in Justin's life that led him to not pursue a career in engineering, but rather to focus instead on medicine. And currently, Justin is a freshman at Penn State studying pre-med, specifically in the PMM program. Justin one day hopes to be a physician who will merge his interests in technological advancements, also with the same type of compassionate care and respect that he witnessed doctors show him in his earlier experiences. So it will be many years until Justin is a doctor, but tonight we invite you to watch his presentation where he speaks about his future career plans and also something that you'll see is quite close to his heart. So without further ado, please let me introduce to you Justin Doe.
Someone you love collapses. They just had a heart attack. Silent and deadly, heart attacks are one of the leading causes of death in Americans. A clock starts ticking. Every minute from here on out counts. The brain can only survive 20 minutes without blood flow. It's now vital to get them to a doctor to perform a life-saving intervention. And for me, that person I loved was my dad. I was just 11 years old, and on a fateful February night, my dad had a heart attack and passed away. And that night left a lasting impact on me. It's affected what profession I've wanted to go to, and it's a reason why I'm here now at Penn State for the PMM program, an accelerated BSMD program that will help hopefully set me on the path of becoming a physician. However, on that night, I was just a kid in suburban United States, just 20 minutes away from the nearest doctor. However, in some places of the United States, the nearest doctor may be more than 2 hours away, far longer than the 20-minute time window afforded by these critical issues. And this is because of the physician shortage. And to tackle the issue of the physician shortage, this country must take decisive action at both the healthcare level and the government level. And in this speech, I will quantify and qualify how big of an issue the physician shortage is. I will propose a three-pronged approach to tackle this issue. And then I will explain why my solution, or the solution appropriated by many different organizations, is not only effective, but why it is realistic and reasonable. So now that I've discussed what this speech is about, let's actually discuss what is the physician shortage. Simply put, the United States does not have enough doctors to take care of all of the patients. An article in Medical News written by Yolanda Smith in February 2019 found that a physician shortage can lower quality of care that patients receive by reducing the time that each doctor gets to see each patient, increasing the workload, and increasing healthcare prices. And the question is, how bad is it? Well, in some areas, the issue is already very real. An article by AAMC News by Peter Jarrett, published in February 2020, found that patients have to travel 70 miles to see a physician at the nearest hospital, and often even further in some rural areas. And this issue is not stagnant. It will get worse over time. A report for Tim Dull for the AAMC, American Association of Medical Colleges, published in June 2020, also estimated that there will be a shortage of 139,000 physicians by 2032. That's barely 10 years away. That's enough doctors to populate a small city. Seen here is Concord, California, a city with 130,000 people. So now that we've defined what the issue is, what's the solution? And to tackle this solution, a multi-pronged approach must be implemented. And it will tackle three key areas. Number one, it will tackle the supply. By increasing the number of residency training slots, we can increase the supply of physicians. The second part of this plan will tackle the demand. By using physician extenders, we can increase the number of patients each physician sees, and therefore decrease the demand for physicians. Finally, we will focus our efforts by creating programs in medical schools to incentivize medical students to practice in areas that need physicians the most, namely rural areas. So let's discuss number one, supply. In the United States, all medical students must go to a 3 to 8 year residency at the end of their medical school time to get practical hands-on experience on patients before practicing independently. And this is currently the bottleneck for our training. An article from the Association of American Medical Colleges in 2019 found that while the number of residency slots have remained stagnant, medical school enrollment has increased by 30% since 2002. And this presents a clear bottleneck. It doesn't matter how many people want to become doctors. It doesn't even matter how many medical schools there are. If residency slots don't expand to meet the demand, there simply cannot be any more doctors being trained. And this is currently being limited by federal funding. And bills similar to the Resident Physician Shortage Reduction Act of 2019 aims to increase slots by 15,000 over 5 years. And this will help solve this bottleneck and therefore increase the supply of physicians in circulation. The second part of this plan requires the use of physician extenders to help reduce the demand of physicians. And this will be used using nurse practitioners, NPs, and physician associates, PAs. Now, NPs and PAs are members of the healthcare team that are between nurses and doctors. They have more clinical experience than nurses, which allows them to treat patients with routine issues, freeing up the doctors with the extra training to focus on critical care patients. And this is already being done in many states. An article by the American Journal of Managed Care by Dr. Mangiafico, written in January 2018, found that using physician extenders like CRNAs provide an opportunity for the physician anesthesiologist to focus on emergencies and saving lives and not some of the lower level tasks such as initial screening and paperwork. And let me be clear, these extenders do not replace physicians, they simply allow them to see more patients. Finally, we will focus our efforts by implementing rural training programs. Rural areas are being hit the hardest because physicians simply aren't incentivized to practice there. And medical schools have found that by admitting students from rural backgrounds, they will often go back to their hometowns and practice there. And the Jefferson Medical College's Physician Shortage Area Program is an example of one of these. And a study by Dr. Rabinowitz et al., published in February 2011, found that 10 times the number of medical students in this specialized program will go back to practice in rural areas, 32 versus 3%. And this is obviously a clear way to help address this shortcoming. So to summarize my main points, by implementing more residency slots to help fulfill supply, reduce the amount of physicians needed by using NPs and PAs, and implementing rural training programs, we can alleviate the physician shortage. And immediate action by government and healthcare must be taken to solve this critical issue. And I hope that by implementing these approaches at this level, we can ensure that everyone in the United States gets the healthcare that we all so desperately need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all for being here and supporting our speakers tonight. I'm Vanessa McLaughlin, and this semester I had the pleasure of teaching Ashley Bolds, our next speaker. Ashley, whose goal it is to attend medical school and become a pediatrician, will speak about her proposal to eliminate the substantial monetary cost of the medical college admission test, or MCATs, and the study materials and prep courses, so as to equalize medical school applicants instead of burdening financially disadvantaged students. Ashley is a biochemistry and molecular biology major on the pre-med track and has paid thousands of dollars for her MCAT test prep. This is personal to her. She has a solution that could help. Please welcome Ashley Bolds.
Good afternoon, everyone. While holding these 8 Kaplan MCAT test preparation books in my hand, many of you see these books as a step forward in my pursuit to becoming a doctor. However, the total cost of these books was $2,500, and for many prospective medical students, these books are a setback on their road to a medical degree. It is well known that to become a doctor, a student must be hardworking, passionate about medicine, and have good grades in college. But what is not as obvious is that the students or their parents must be financially stable for one to be successful at getting into medical school. How do I know this? Well, my name is Ashley Bolds, and I'm a first-generation African-American college student who is also considered to be low income. I'm a prospective medical student, and through being in a diverse, rigorous academic program at Penn State called the Millennium Scholars Program, I could receive those books at a free cost. Without the financial assistance, I could not afford those books and the class that accompanied it. I would be set back on my journey to become a doctor. The MCAT should be an all equalizer for students wishing to go to medical school. The American Association of Medical Colleges, otherwise known as the AAMC, is the organization which created the MCAT. They should mandate that all test preparation courses are free, as to not serve as a financial hindrance. The MCAT helps determine if students are ready for medical school. However, today I would like to speak about how minorities and low-income students are being set back by MCAT test preparation courses, and my policy proposal to eliminate financial discrimination. To illustrate my policy, I want to inform on the problem in its entirety. The problem is that MCAT preparation courses are barriers that limit the number of minorities and low-income students that make it to medical school. The cause of this problem is inadvertent, as although the preparation courses were created to help boost the scores of students who wish to take the test, there were seemingly unintended byproducts. The cost of the courses created new problems for disadvantaged students who already must overcome other obstacles such as lack of opportunity due to environment, language barriers, or many times multiple setbacks. This problem dates back to slavery, and it encompasses systemic racism and discrimination. According to an article written by Ms. Brownlee, a senior contributor to Forbes magazine, there were fewer Black men in medical school in 2014 than 1978. This problem does not just affect pre-medical students, it affects everyone, as limiting diversity into medical colleges hinders the potential expansion of techniques and practices that would form new perspectives and backgrounds for future physicians. Not only is that an issue, but America today has a shortage of doctors. Yet there's a hindrance against certain groups that can apply, which affects the wait time for patients in the future. Additionally, with the recent pandemic, it has shown a divide in trust of diverse people with medicine, and this is due to the lack of diversity in the medical field, which can be seen all the way down at the student level. So in 2019, O'Donnell and Robinson from USA Today stated that only 7.7% of medical students identify as African American, which is short of the 13.2% in the population. When students have a lower chance of getting into medical school due to them not being able to afford preparation for a supposed all-equalizing test, then there must be change at the initial level, which is the MCAT test preparation cost. So to emphasize the seriousness of the cause, to make a change, I have a proposal. The AAMC must not allow test preparation companies to charge students to access preparation courses. The law will maintain that the MCAT is an all-equalizing aspect of a student's application, regardless of their upbringing, the college they went to, or the opportunities that they were given. If the law is passed, it would allow for full-length practice tests to be readily available and for MCAT test prep courses and material to be at no cost to the student. It will prohibit companies like Kaplan and Princeton Review from selling resources regarding to the MCAT that could be of advantage. As for administration, the AAMC will monitor these companies to ensure that there is no financial bias. Equally as important though, these companies can still make their money through ad revenue on their websites, in which they can incorporate advertising that cannot be skipped by students in order to pay the teachers and other employees. I cannot stress the importance and fairness that this will create. This new law would be enforced through AAMC and student aid offices at universities that have medical colleges. Awareness and implementation of the change will be through capacity building and testimonies. One type of testimony would include David Velasquez, who's a third-year Harvard student who's also an immigrant. He asked Princeton Review for a discount on one of their $1,200 prep packages. He stated, "I thought maybe they hear I was desperate and put me on a payment plan." However, he was declined and set back with only $5 in his bank account. If the proposal doesn't get passed through, petitions will be administered for system changes, as well as the cost of companies being funded through ad revenue. Diversity aid offices at universities could set up funding for their disadvantaged students, similar to Simi Kimmel's Medical College's Step Up program, which, among other things, provides MCAT preparation for disadvantaged students as stated in their financial barriers to medicine. As the pandemic becomes more controlled by vaccinations, now is the perfect time to enforce this because of the clear attention on discrimination taking place within the United States, as well as system changes already being underway due to COVID. Through social media and the push for change, many people will want to seek this. For those who do not care or are unaware, resources through capacity building will teach them. Through learning the statistics, it is evident that this policy could greatly benefit the future healthcare system. Although some efforts have been made to lower the cost for eligible students, the MCAT prep courses still serve as an obstacle for many. One major counter-argument is that there already are efforts put in place to lower the financial burden on some students. The AAMC's Fee Assistance Program gives eligible low-income students the opportunity to receive financial benefits. However, according to Diversity in Medicine's Facts and Figures of 2019, this program does not teach strategy, which is a big component of the test. Additionally, this fee assistance program does not include all disadvantaged students because there are eligibility requirements and an application process. So for this reason, this new law would open new opportunities for the success of underrepresented and low-income students. And this is because currently, the all-equalizing aspect of the MCAT is demised by these expensive test preparation courses. But the policy that I propose today will eliminate discrimination and positively impact the future of our healthcare system. Although there are aids out there that help lower the cost of test preparation materials, it still leaves students left out. MCAT preparation courses are a barrier for many qualified and low-income students to get to medical school. So like Rabia Karini said, medicine is raw and real and involves caring for those whom society has shunned. Her statement is not limited to the patient population, but the student population as well.
Hello, my name is Meg Tully, and I'm an assistant teaching professor in the CAS department at Penn State. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our next contestant, Tristan Zanowick. Tristan studies science and sports studies, but today he's going to talk about a topic that probably impacts most of the lives of the people watching, student loan debt. Tristan has been keeping up with President Biden's proposed plans for student loan forgiveness, and now he's going to advocate for his favorite of those plans. I hope you enjoy this speech as much as I do. The cats are rooting for Tristan too.
At the start of this year, student debt across the United States totaled $1.7 trillion, with over 44 million borrowers averaging $40,000 per person, according to StudentLoanHero.com and Department of Education data on the matter. As most of you know, and I know, planning for student loans and student debt can totally change your college experience and how you plan for your financial future once you're out. For prospective students, it can mean the difference between joining the workforce and attending university right out of high school. And for college grads, it can mean up to $200,000 in student debt as soon as you leave school. In his recent presidential campaign, Joe Biden talked briefly about a plan to forgive some of this student debt and now has the power to take action. There are currently 3 proposed plans on the table. The first being to forgive nothing and keep it as is for students to deal with on their own. The second being forgiving $10,000 in student debt per borrower. And the third being forgiving $50,000 or more. By breaking down the positive impact such a bill could have on the communities that need it the most, I will be showing why forgiving only $10,000 is the best option based on its financial cost. So let's talk about the problem and how it got so bad. As you can see in this chart, and as broken down in a Forbes article from August of 2020, college costs have risen about 500% in the past 35 years, over twice the rate of inflation. This means that students are now going to be paying more for their college and not getting that same return when they join the workforce, just elongating that process of repaying those loans. With that, this affects other aspects of the economy, such as major financial decisions like buying a house, having children, and saving for retirement, which is also delayed based on the fact that students are going to be paying back these loans for so much longer. That's pointed out by Spencer Lindell, writer for the New York Times, in an article earlier this year. Along with that, it actually encourages graduates to work for more money to pay back these loans rather than pursuing social work or lower paying jobs that might be more up their alley and just as beneficial to their communities. Because of this, that is why I fully support giving $10,000 in student debt for government-funded loans for all current students and graduates with loans out. This can be done through Congress, meaning it would go through the House and the Senate, and if that doesn't work, it can be done through executive order. In total, this bill would cost approximately $375 billion, according to economist Adam Looney of the Brookings Institute. And while this sounds like a really large number right off the bat, it's actually quite fair when compared to other options, which I'll break down further later. So let's talk about who this will impact and benefit the most. Thanks to Department of Education data, we can see the percent of borrowers who owe certain amounts of money currently. And of the 44 million borrowers that currently have student debt, a third of them owe less than $10,000 and a little over a half owe less than $20,000. This means that a bill for giving $10,000 would wipe out a majority of student debt for a major part of the population of those with student loans, which is really beneficial. Beyond that, Jordan Weissman of Slate Magazine breaks down in an article from February of this year that those who often have the hardest time repaying that debt are those in these smaller brackets of balances owing $10,000 or $20,000, often because they dropped out. We know that these people are defaulting the most on these loans, and a bill for giving $10,000 would help them greatly. It would pay back a majority of their loans and really set them, get them started for the rest of the next steps of their life rather than worrying about paying back this money. On the other hand, Weissman also breaks down the right side of this graph of those owing, the higher brackets such as 200,000 or more are often those who pursue advanced degrees such as doctors and lawyers. While forgiving $10,000 is still going to help them just at a fraction of the percentage of what they owe, they aren't necessarily going to need the help because they're pursuing careers that will pay back this debt rather quickly. While it's still a financial stress, they're not going to need as much help and often default less than those who drop out and owe smaller balances, surprisingly. So as you can see, $10,000 would help a community that would really need it and can be beneficial to all current borrowers. So you might be wondering, why not more? Other congressmen, such as Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, have suggested $50,000 in forgiveness and the cancellation of all student debt. And the biggest flaws with these come financially. They're incredibly costly and not very fair to the broader American public. As you can see in this graph, brought to us from the Brookings Institute in an article of March of this year, forgiving all student debt would cost nearly $1.6 trillion, making it the largest government transfer program in recent history over things such as food stamps and unemployment insurance. Along with that, forgiving student debt up to $50,000 would cost approximately $1 trillion, which is more expensive than what we've spent on housing assistance programs and welfare. As much as I'd like to see my student debt wiped out and the rest of the populations, I don't think it's very fair to the public that such a small fraction of the population are going to be benefiting from a bill of this magnitude, while things such as welfare and food stamps that affect more people in more needy scenarios are not going to be getting a lot of that money. That is why I think $10,000 provides that balance between helping people and also remaining financially aware and fair. Along with that, I'm sure many people of other generations who have already paid back those student loans are going to feel the need to be recompensated, as it isn't really fair to them that they had to pay back their loans without the help of this government forgiveness. And I think $10,000 is that amount that will lead to the least anger from this community, because it's not as big as, say, forgiving $200,000. So as you can see, there are a lot of things to consider in a bill of this importance, and I hope you can see that forgiving $10,000 is the best option here to balance out that need to help these people with student loans, but also remaining financially correct. This isn't going to completely fix the issue of rising college costs, which is a bigger challenge to take on, but it will provide that necessary lifeline to those with their backs against the wall, setting them up for a stronger and less financially stressed life. I urge you to find out more information on how this can help you, spread that information, and even potentially contact your local congressman to get them on board, because this thing really needs a lot of people's support, especially as it's going to become more talked about in major news as it comes up. So thank you and have a good one.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kelly Williams-Nagel, and I am a doctoral student in the Communication Arts and Sciences Department and a CAS 100A instructor. It is my pleasure to introduce my student, Arden Bellamere, who will be advocating for financial literacy courses in high school. She argues that understanding personal finance is incredibly vital to navigating adulthood and starting off on the right foot. Arden is a sophomore accounting major, so she is quite knowledgeable about this subject. Arden, I am so proud of you, and it is a privilege to be your instructor this semester. I wish the best of luck to all of our finalists and to all of our CAS 100A students as they finish up this semester. Thank you.
Did you know, according to InvestWallet.com, only about 55% of adults are financially literate? I find it incredibly alarming that nearly half of the contributing members of our economy lack a sufficient understanding of money management. Yet, schools are grazing over curriculum regarding financial literacy. Considering that there is not a state or national requirement to teach financial literacy, most schools don't bother. To solve the problem of lack of financial literacy education in school curriculum, today I'm arguing that the PA Department of Education should approve a standalone course in personal finance as a graduation requirement for all high school students. To convince you that this policy should be adopted, I will first describe the problem of our nation's failure to provide sufficient financial literacy education in high school. Second, I will explain the existing plan in place. And finally, I will propose a policy that the PA Department of Education should implement to increase financial literacy. I believe we as students can all relate to graduating high school, entering the real world, and suddenly having this huge financial responsibility on our shoulders that we're not prepared for. We are expected to understand how to manage our money. However, virtually none of the curriculum we were taught in high school has prepared us for this whatsoever. While I can tell you off the top of my head that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, I came out of high school with no idea how to write a check, balance checkbook, fill out a W-2, or create a budget, all of which are everyday expectations of adults. Students aren't learning vital money management habits, often leading to lifelong money struggles. As a country, we've seen where a lack of financial literacy can lead. Millions of people struggle every day with their money, winding up deep in debt and short on hope, but it doesn't have to be that way. A lot of the money problems Americans are facing could have been avoided if financial literacy was taught earlier in school. If we don't take action now, the number of financially illiterate adults will just continue to increase. Some of the causes for personal finance not being taught in school are the lack of a national or state requirement for schools to do so, concerns over how to compensate for adding additional curriculum, and resistance from schools to incorporate this into curriculum, often pushing this responsibility off onto parents. In a 2017 T. Rowe Price survey, it stated that 69% of parents admit they're reluctant to broach the topic of finances with their children. So, if neither our parents or our teachers are teaching us about finances, when are we supposed to learn this? Now, shifting gears to looking at the existing plan in place, currently it's up to states to decide individually whether they want to require financial literacy curriculum in their state. There's no national requirement, so many states just choose not to require it and are not placing any sort of pressure on individual school districts to teach it. Therefore, many schools don't bother to teach personal finance and fail to realize the financial options like grants from nonprofits that are available to fund the incorporation of this curriculum. According to a Next Gen Personal Finance survey, seemingly 21 states require high school students to take a course in personal finance. However, upon closer inspection, 15 of those states consider financial literacy curriculum integrated into another course to be meeting that requirement. They consider spending roughly 2 weeks on a personal finance lesson as part of a different course to be good enough. That leaves only 6 states that actually require a standalone high school course to be taken. 6 of 50. Furthermore, a 2019 Forbes article stated that a mere 1 in 6 high school students are required to take at least one separate semester of personal finance to graduate. 1 in 6. Are we really that naive to believe that teaching 1 in 6 American students to manage their money is good enough? I, for one, can vouch that my high school failed me in this department. And this seems to be a common consensus, as 69% of young Americans agree that their high school education did a poor job in teaching them healthy financial habits, according to a Champlin EDU survey. Clearly, we need to do better, and that is why I believe we must implement a new policy. I propose that we have the PA Department of Education require each high school student to take a standalone financial literacy class as a graduation requirement. By having the state require it, the decision wouldn't be up to each district. Instead, all of the schools in the state would have to teach it, ensuring that every student in the state is at least gaining a fundamental understanding of money management prior to high school graduation. Additionally, by requiring it to be a standalone course, districts would not be able to get away with solely integrating it into another course. By having this as a state requirement, we would have the governmental support for financial literacy education to be taken seriously. The state would be able to use several policy instruments to ensure that each district was held accountable. They could provide inducements in the form of grants and additional compensation that are rewarded to schools who excel the expectations for financial literacy. They could also use mandates and fine all schools who fail to meet these requirements if they either refuse to incorporate it at all or just simply refuse to offer it as a standalone course. While I personally believe that this policy would do nothing but good for the financial education system in Pennsylvania, some people have expressed hesitation with its financial burden and potential to take away from other courses. In response to these concerns, I can assure you that it isn't nearly as much of a financial burden as assumed. According to Nan Morrison of CNBC, legislators need to realize that even a small amount for teachers and professional education make a big difference here. It costs less than $150 per teacher for professional development. That's not a big expense. It often requires absolutely zero state funding whatsoever, with nonprofit groups providing financial support in addition to free training and classroom resources. Additionally, some people think this requirement will take away from other courses already in place, but this is in fact not an issue, considering that the state has already passed a law that allows financial literacy classes to be taken in place of another course. Furthermore, according to a 2020 article by the Financial Educators Council, educational programs benefit 100% of students. Compare this to only 19% of students who need high school algebra in their jobs. These financial fundamental skills can be applied to everyday situations, and it's a skill that reaps lifelong benefits. It deserves a place in our curriculum. As I begin to wrap up here, I want to reiterate just how serious of a problem financial literacy is in this country, as it has a ripple effect with the potential to hurt us all when our economy takes a hit. If we want to make better financial decisions, it starts with teaching our youth to do so. The need to be financially responsible is not going away. If we refuse to make financial literacy a requirement for every student, we can expect them to head down the same unfortunate path as so many poor financial planners have made before them. Ultimately, we need the PA Department of Education to make it a requirement for each and every student to pass a standalone financial literacy class as a graduation requirement. The key is realizing that our nation's economic tomorrow depends on the financial and business skills we give students today. So how about we start here in Pennsylvania and do right by our students and set a financial literacy example for the rest of the country?
Thank you all for attending and viewing the Spring 2021 Public Speaking Contest Final Round. My name is Matthew Parnell, and I'm a graduate teaching assistant in the Department of Communication Arts and Sciences. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce my student, KAYLA McCauley, who will be speaking today about gun legislation in the United States Congress. KAYLA, a Pennsylvania native, has political advocacy run in her family. As a volunteer, her father advocated for the passage of the 1994 Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act, and after witnessing the aftermath of the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting, KAYLA felt she must use her voice to speak out against gun violence. She is no stranger to standing at the crossroads of important issues, as her speeches this semester have engaged important topics that matter very deeply to our society. I want to wish KAYLA, along with the other competitors, much luck. I love the public speaking competition because it showcases quite how strong our public speaking students are and how dedicated the faculty of the CAS department are towards our students. With that, I'll let KAYLA take it from here with her speech entitled Partisan Firearm Regulation, Overdue Steps Towards Gun Safety.
Lila Hernandez was only 15 years old when she was shot and killed during the Odessa, Texas shooting rampage, reported Stella 2019. She had just celebrated her quinceañera. During the same shooting, 6 others were killed and 25 were injured. According to Blankston and Williams 2019, the shooter had attempted to purchase a gun but had been barred from doing so due to a failed background check. He then went ahead and legally purchased a gun through a private sale and then committed the murders. According to the Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund, in the United States, every single day there are 100 deaths associated with gun violence. There are an additional 230 people a day shot and wounded. In the US, there are 2 ways in which citizens can legally purchase a gun without going through a background check. One way is referred to as the Charleston loophole, and the other is referred to as the gun show loophole. In order to ensure safety in the US, the Senate should pass legislation which requires background checks for all gun sales, as well as extends the time that the FBI has to run through background checks. In this speech, I will first discuss the ability for legal purchases of guns, both with and without background checks. Then I will discuss a mass shooting that could have been avoided if these loopholes were closed. Finally, I will discuss the 2 pieces of legislation which just passed through the House and are waiting to be heard on the Senate floor. These 2 bills would effectively close both loopholes and create protections and restrictions for gun purchases in the United States. To begin, I'm going to discuss how an individual can purchase a gun in the United States and how they can do so without running through a background check. In the US, licensed sellers of firearms, also known as federal firearms licensees, are required to run a check through the National Instant Criminal Backgrounds Check System, or the NICS, when an individual attempts to purchase a gun. The NICS then determines the eligibility of the individual according to the FBI official website, note date. It takes about 30 seconds for this check to be done, and if the individual is not flagged, they may purchase a gun. The first loophole I'm going to discuss is the Charleston loophole. If the individual is flagged, then the FBI is given a 3-day window in order to go through a thorough background check. If the thorough background check is not completed in that 3-day window, the individual may go ahead and purchase the gun anyway, without a background check. This 3-day window is a short time period and is especially dangerous when there are heightened levels of gun purchases, as we have seen in the year 2020. According to Case 2021, FBI data shows that there were nearly 40 million background checks run in 2020, far higher than the average of 26 million in the previous 5 years. According to Everytown, it is estimated that 438,000 background checks went uncompleted in 2020. The second loophole I will address is the gun show loophole. While licensed sellers are required to go through the NICS, unlicensed sellers or individuals who do not make a livelihood off of sales from guns are not required to do so. This allows for minors, convicted criminals, or anyone else that otherwise would have been barred from making a purchase of a firearm to do so legally. As stated by the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, ending the gun show loophole would put a barrier between legal and illegal purchases in the United States for guns. Now that we have gone over how legal purchases are made, I'm going to go over a deadly shooting that could have been avoided. The Charleston loophole acquired its name after an event in Charleston, South Carolina. In 2015, a gunman killed 9 people in a historically Black church. According to Payne 2019, the gunman had been arrested only a week prior to committing the murders and should have been barred from purchasing a gun. However, mistypes in the background checks did not give the FBI enough time in the 3-day window, and the killer was then able to go ahead and purchase the gun. In March 2021, 2 bills passed through the House that would effectively end both loopholes if they were to be passed in the Senate. I'm now going to go over each bill and discuss how they would effectively close both the Charleston and gun show loophole. The first bill is the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021. This bill would extend the FBI's time period to vet anyone who was flagged from 3 days to 10 days. Extending this time period would effectively end the Charleston loophole and give the FBI more time to go through every individual. The second bill is the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. This bill would require every single seller of firearms, even those who are unlicensed, to go through the national background check system. This also would prevent sales between families and friends, which would aid the country in keeping a record of firearms and their owners. These 2 bills would effectively address the Charleston and the gun show loophole. Often, gun regulations are seen as partisan. However, both of these bills are largely bipartisan. After the El Paso, Texas, and the Dayton, Ohio shootings in 2019, President Trump stated that he was in support of universal background checks, according to Law 2019. A 2017 study found that 97% of Americans were in support of universal background checks, and 77% thought it was too easy to acquire a gun in the United States. In this speech, I discussed the legal options for purchasing a gun in the United States and explained the ways in which background checks are evaded through the Charleston and the gun show loophole. The United States Senate should pass both the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021 and the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019 in order to reduce gun violence. As stated by Leonhardt 2021 in the New York Times, the scale of gun deaths in the United States is not inevitable. the country could reduce the death toll, perhaps substantially, if it chose to. Thank you.
Hello again. That concludes our public speaking contest for spring of 2021. You have now seen all 6 competitors and their impressive performances. So now the next step is going to be for you to navigate over to our awards video, also listed on this YouTube account, the link for which should be available below, or maybe over there, or over there. I'm not sure where I am in space and time. So thank you again for joining us, for supporting our students, and we hope to see you again in the fall, hopefully in person, as we continue this departmental tradition. Thank you.